When Mafia boss Quentin Vance saw his maid Devin Blake dancing in an ivory dress with a man's hands on her waist, he descended from the VIP balcony like a man possessed, grabbed her in front of 300 witnesses, and screamed the command that would shatter his reputation forever. Stop dancing right now. What he didn't know, what would turn his rage into humiliation and his humiliation into obsession, was that the man he thought was his rival Arthur Vane was actually Devin's brother, and by the time he realized his catastrophic mistake, every phone in the club was recording the moment the most feared man in the city lost control over a woman who'd never been his to claim. But it started 30 seconds earlier, when Quentin was still in control. The second Quentin Vance saw her, the strategic calculus of his night evaporated into a blinding white fury. He stood on the upper balcony of Onyx Arthur Vane's nightclub, enemy territory, tall and imposing in a charcoal suit and black shirt, the kind of understated power that made men instinctively lower their voices. The balcony overlooked the main floor like a throne over a coliseum. Neon lights washing over the packed crowd in waves of electric blue and crimson. The bass shook the railing under his hands. The air smelled of expensive cologne, spilled champagne, and adrenaline. Quentin's jaw was set, his dark eyes scanning the crowd with the practiced efficiency of a man who'd learned to catalog threats before they materialized. His security detail flanked him, Marcus on the left, silent and watchful, Dane on the right, already tense because they were in hostile territory, and the boss had insisted on coming anyway. But none of that mattered now, because his attention was locked on one point, one person, Devin Blake, his maid, his quiet, necessary piece, the woman who kept his chaotic world organized, who brought him coffee exactly the way he needed it without being asked, who moved through his penthouse like a ghost who somehow made the shadows feel less suffocating, the woman he came home to every night even though she didn't know that's what she was. The woman he tried not to want because wanting anyone was a vulnerability he couldn't afford. If you've ever felt powerless watching someone you care about walk into danger, if you've ever lost control over the one thing you swore to protect, this story is for you. Hit that subscribe button right now and comment where you're watching from. We're building a family of people who understand that love and obsession are separated by the thinnest line. And she was on the dance floor in a black dress that defied every memory he had of her. The dress was cut low enough to make his chest tighten, fitted enough to reveal a body he'd spent 2 years pretending not to notice. Her dark hair fell in loose waves over her bare shoulders, catching the strobe lights like liquid silk. Her skin glowed under the neon, flushed from dancing, alive in a way he'd never seen inside the controlled environment of his home. She laughed at something, her head thrown back, her smile so genuine it felt like a punch to his sternum. And the man she was dancing with had his hands on her waist. Everything inside Quentin stopped. That moment, everything in the room changed. The music became static. The crowd became irrelevant. His bodyguards continued their low conversation about exit routes and backup locations, but he didn't hear a single word. His vision narrowed to a single devastating point. Devin Blake, the woman who kept his life from falling apart, was letting a stranger touch her like he had any right to her body. Quentin's hands tightened on the railing until his knuckles went white. His chest felt like someone had driven a fist through his ribs and was squeezing his heart in a vice. Something hot and possessive surged through him with a violence that startled even him, a territorial rage so absolute it violated every principle of control he'd built his empire on. He didn't have the right to feel this way. He knew that. Devin Blake was his employee, not his property. She clocked in at 8, kept his world running until 6, and what she did with her nights was none of his business. He'd never asked her to be anything more than competent and invisible. But knowing didn't change, the jealousy tearing through him like a serrated blade. He couldn't explain why, but danger was closing in. The man pulled her closer. Devin didn't pull away. She smiled up at him, genuinely smiled, and the man leaned in to say something that made her laugh again. Quentin watched the man's hand slide from her waist to the small of her back, watched Devin's body move in rhythm with his, watched them exist in a world where Quentin Vance didn't matter at all. And then the lights shifted. And Quentin saw the man's face. The world tilted. Arthur Vane. But what he discovered next changed everything. Not some random stranger. Not some meaningless civilian who'd gotten lucky in a club. Arthur fucking Vane, the rival who'd been systematically trying to dismantle Quentin's shipping routes for 6 months. The snake who'd poached 3 of Quentin's suppliers in the last quarter. The smug bastard who'd sent a gift basket to Quentin's office last week with a card that said, "Better luck next time." His maid, his routine, his peace, was dancing with the man actively trying to destroy him. Devin Blake, the woman he trusted with his home, his schedule, his private space, was in enemy territory, in a dress that made her look like she belonged here, laughing with Arthur Vane like they were old friends. The betrayal hit harder than the jealousy. This wasn't just personal. This was professional. This was a security breach. This was his Devon being used as a pawn in a game she didn't even know she was playing. Or worse, she did know. Someone in the room was lying, but who? Boss, Marcus said quietly, urgency creeping into his tone. They're waiting for you in the VIP room. Vane's associate wants to talk terms on the... I don't care, Quentin said. His voice was flat, dead, the kind of calm that preceded violence. Marcus stiffened. Dane's hand drifted toward the weapon under his jacket. They both recognized that tone. They'd both seen what happened when Quentin Vance stopped caring about strategy and started acting on instinct. Boss, we're in Vane's club. If you make a move... I said I don't care. His next decision would decide whether he lived or died. Quentin was already moving. He didn't wait for permission. He didn't check his surroundings. He descended the stairs with the single-minded focus of a predator who'd just spotted prey, his long strides eating up the distance between the balcony and the dance floor. His security detail scrambled to follow, barking hushed warnings into their earpieces. But Quentin ignored them. The club was packed, bodies moving, lights strobing, bass shaking the floor hard enough to rattle teeth. Yet the crowd parted without a word as Quentin crossed the dance floor. People felt him coming before they saw him. They recognized the way he moved, the quiet authority that made even drunk strangers instinctively step aside. Whispers spread like wildfire. Someone said his name loud enough to carry over the music. Phones came out. The crowd shifted from dancing to watching, sensing blood in the water. But Devon didn't see him coming. What he didn't know was that someone was watching. She was still dancing, still smiling, still letting Arthur Vane hold her like he had any right to touch what belonged to Quentin. Quentin reached them in 3 long steps. His hand closed around Devon's wrist, not rough, but absolute, the kind of grip that communicated ownership without room for negotiation. Devon gasped and spun, her eyes going wide with shock. Quentin? Her voice, his name in her mouth for the first time ever. No, Mr. Vance. No formality should have felt like a victory. Instead, it felt like confirmation that she'd been hiding this whole other life from him. A life where she called him by his first name. A life where she wore dresses like this and danced with men like Arthur Vane. What are you doing here? Devon breathed, her face a mixture of confusion and something that looked dangerously close to guilt. What am I doing here? Quentin repeated. His voice was low, dangerous, barely controlled. What are you doing here dressed like that? The words came out sharper than he intended. Possessive, jealous. Exactly the kind of emotional exposure he'd spent 20 years learning to avoid. In that moment, the entire balance of power flipped. Arthur Vane stepped forward, his expression shifting from surprise to calculated amusement. Vance, didn't expect to see you on the dance floor. His smile was all teeth. Thought you preferred to watch from above. Like always, Quentin's jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Arthur's bodyguards materialized from the crowd, flanking their boss. Marcus and Dane closed in on Quentin's sides, hands hovering near concealed weapons. The entire club seemed to hold its breath. This wasn't just 2 men having a disagreement. This was 2 kings facing off in the middle of a crowded coliseum, and everyone knew that someone was about to bleed. But Quentin didn't care about Arthur Vane. He didn't care about the security breach or the strategic implications or the fact that phones were recording every second of this disaster. He only cared about Devon. Devon, who was staring at him like she didn't recognize the man holding her wrist. Devon, whose flushed cheeks and rapid breathing meant she'd been dancing for a while. Devon, who smelled like perfume he'd never smelled before, something sweet and dangerous that didn't belong in his controlled, sterile penthouse. This place is not for you, Quentin said, and every word was tight with jealousy he couldn't hide. You don't belong here with strangers putting their hands on you. Devon's eyes flashed. She yanked her wrist from his grip, and the loss of contact felt like a slap. Excuse me? Her voice was sharp, louder than he'd ever heard it. I'm off work. I can go wherever I want. Not here. Not with Quentin's gaze snapped to Arthur, who was watching the entire scene with obvious delight. Not with him. You think this is safe? Quentin demanded, his control fracturing with every word. You think I'm going to let you stay here with people who want to use you to get to me? Let me. Devon's voice went dangerously quiet. You're not my father, Quentin, and you're sure as hell not my boyfriend. For the first time, he wasn't in control. The word hit harder than the music. Boyfriend. She'd drawn the line. She'd made it clear exactly where they stood. Employee and employer. Nothing more. He had no claim. No right. No justification for the jealousy that was tearing him apart from the inside. The crowd around them had grown. Phones were raised, recording. Someone whispered Quentin's name in recognition. Someone else muttered something about Vance losing his mind over a woman. The lights flashed again, washing Devon's face in blue and then red. And Quentin suddenly felt exposed, like the entire city was watching him lose control over a woman who had never been his to lose. Arthur Vane stepped between them, his smile widening. "You heard the lady, Vance. She's off the clock. Which means she's free to dance with whoever she wants." He placed a possessive hand on Devon's shoulder. "Isn't that right, sweetheart?" Quentin's vision went red. "Don't touch her." "Why?" Arthur's voice was pure mockery. "She's not yours. You just said so yourself, you're not her boyfriend. So why do you care who touches her?" "She's my," Quentin started, but the words died in his throat. What was she? His maid? His employee? His obsession? His weakness? But this wasn't even the most shocking part. Devon stepped forward fast, her face a mixture of anger and something else, something that looked like desperation. "He's my brother," she said loudly, cutting through the music and the murmurs and Quentin's spiraling rage. The entire world froze. Quentin stared at Arthur Vane, stared at Devon, stared at Arthur again, searching for the resemblance he should have seen immediately but had been too blinded by jealousy to notice. Same dark hair, same sharp cheekbones, same defiant stance. "Your brother," Quentin repeated slowly, his voice hollow. Arthur's smug smile faded into genuine confusion. "Wait, you thought I was—" He looked at Devon, then back at Quentin, and then he started laughing. Full body, genuine laughter. "You thought I was her date?" People in the crowd lowered their phones slightly, confused. Some laughed along nervously. The energy shifted from anticipation of violence to secondhand embarrassment. Quentin felt heat crawl up his neck, humiliation, shock, jealousy mixing into something sharp and painful that lodged in his chest like broken glass. He trusted her, and that was his biggest mistake. "No," Devon said quietly, and there was something devastatingly sad in her voice. He didn't think. He just assumed, like always. Jesse Blake, not Arthur Vane. Jesus Christ. How had Quentin gotten that so catastrophically wrong, placed a protective hand on Devon's shoulder? "You really thought I was her boyfriend?" Jesse asked, his earlier amusement fading into something harder. "You really came down here ready to start a war over your maid?" Quentin opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He couldn't explain, couldn't justify. Couldn't do anything except stand there while the evidence of his complete loss of control played out in front of hundreds of witnesses. "Quentin," Devon said, and his name in her mouth hurt now. "I'm going home. I have work in the morning." "Devon, wait," he reached for her, but she stepped back. The rejection was physical, visceral. "No," she said firmly. "You don't get to do this. You don't get to act like you own me outside of work. I deserve a life, Quentin, a normal one, with friends, with family. Without you storming in like you have any right to control who I see or where I go." Her next words hit him harder than any bullet. The words landed like bullets. Each one hit something vital. Quentin felt his throat tighten, felt his pride try to speak, but nothing came. He'd violated every boundary. He'd exposed himself in the worst possible way. He'd proven that Devon Blake, his quiet, invisible maid, had the power to make him lose every ounce of control he'd spent a lifetime building. And she was walking away. Quentin watched her leave. Watched her brother follow, watched the crowd part for them the same way it had parted for him. The black dress caught the strobe lights one last time, and then she was gone, swallowed by the crowd and the darkness beyond the club's entrance. Marcus leaned close, his voice urgent. "Boss, people filmed everything." Quentin closed his eyes. Of course they had. Of course his worst moment, his most vulnerable, pathetic, desperate moment, would be all over the internet by morning. "Find every video," Quentin said quietly. "I want them gone. All of them? Every single one." He didn't realize this moment would come back to haunt him. He didn't look back toward the exit where Devon had disappeared, but the ache in his chest, the sharp, terrible knowledge that he'd just destroyed the one good thing in his life, only grew. Quentin Vance, the man who controlled half the city's infrastructure, who made politicians nervous and rivals disappear, had just made a public fool of himself. Because of jealousy, because of a woman who didn't owe him anything. A woman who had every right to walk away from him forever. He left the club with heavy steps, the night air cold against his heated skin. Outside, Dane opened the car door without a word. Quentin paused before entering, staring at the wet pavement, swallowing the pride he'd built his entire life on. Tomorrow morning, Devin Blake would walk into his penthouse for work, and she would look at him differently. She would remember tonight. She would remember the jealousy, the humiliation, the possessive rage. She would remember that her employer, the man who was supposed to be professional, controlled, untouchable, had grabbed her wrist in public and tried to control her life. Quentin sat in the car, leaned his head back, and closed his eyes. "I'll fix this," he whispered to the empty back seat. "Tomorrow, whatever it takes." This choice would define the rest of his life. The car pulled away from the curb. The city lights blurred past the windows, but Quentin didn't see any of them. He saw only Devin, her shocked face, her disappointed eyes, her final words. "You don't get to do this." She was right. But God help him, he was going to do it anyway. Because somewhere between hiring her 2 years ago and tonight, Devin Blake had stopped being his maid and started being his entire world. And Quentin Vance didn't know how to let go of the things he needed to survive. Quentin didn't let Devin get far. She made it exactly 3 steps past the club's entrance before his hand closed around her elbow, not rough, but absolute. Jesse spun around, his protective instinct flaring, but Quentin's expression stopped him cold. This wasn't the jealous, humiliated man from 30 seconds ago. This was something colder, more dangerous. The version of Quentin Vance that made headlines and ended careers. "We need to talk," Quentin said. His voice was low, controlled, the kind of calm that preceded violence. "There's nothing to talk about," Devin said, trying to pull away. "You made your point. I embarrassed you. I'm sorry. I'll have my things out of the penthouse by Monday." "No." The word was flat, final. From here on, the rules of the game changed. Jesse stepped forward. "She said she's done. Let her go." Quentin's gaze shifted to Jesse, and for the first time, he really looked at Devin's brother, not as a romantic rival, not as Arthur Vane's associate, but as a young man, maybe 23, 24, wearing an expensive watch he couldn't afford on his own, and a jacket with a label that meant someone had paid for his loyalty, someone like Arthur Vane. Quentin's jaw tightened as the pieces started falling into place, but he filed that information away for later. Right now, he needed Devin. "I'm not asking," Quentin said. He looked back at Devin, and something in his expression shifted just slightly, just enough for her to see the man behind the mask. "Please." The word landed like a bomb. Quentin Vance didn't say please. Quentin Vance gave orders and expected compliance. But standing on the sidewalk outside his rival's club, with his security detail watching and Jesse Blake ready to throw a punch he'd regret, Quentin Vance said, "Please." Devin stared at him. 5 minutes. 20. 10, and you don't get to yell. Deal. If controlling, jealous men who think they own everyone make your blood boil like they do mine, but you're still rooting for Quentin to fix this catastrophic mistake, hit that subscribe button and join us. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Let's stand together for messy, complicated love that demands growth. Marcus pulled the car around a black SUV with windows tinted dark enough to be illegal. Quentin opened the door himself, waiting. Devin looked at Jesse, who shook his head in warning, but she climbed in anyway. Quentin followed, and the door shut with a heavy final click. Through the window, Devin watched Jesse standing on the curb, his phone already out, probably texting someone that his sister had just gotten into a car with the most dangerous man in the city. The SUV pulled away from the curb. The club's neon lights faded behind them, replaced by the cold gleam of streetlights and the empty streets of the financial district. Quentin sat across from her, his expression unreadable, his hands folded in his lap like he was conducting a business meeting instead of kidnapping his maid. There was one detail everyone missed. "Why were you there?" Quentin asked. No preamble, no apology for the scene he'd caused. "I told you. I'm off the clock. I can go wherever." "Don't." His voice was sharp enough to cut. "Don't give me that line again. You hate clubs. You told me that yourself 6 months ago when I asked if you wanted the night off for New Year's Eve. You said you'd rather clean baseboards than deal with drunk people and loud music. So why were you at Onyx? Why were you with Jesse? And why the hell were you dressed like that?" Devin's cheeks flushed. The dress was Jesse's idea. "That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting." Quentin leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his dark eyes locked on hers with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. "Devin, I just made a fool of myself in front of 300 people because I thought you were in danger. The least you can do is tell me why you were really there." "You made a fool of yourself because you're jealous," Devin shot back. "Don't put that on me." He knew something that no one else in the building did. "You're right." The admission came so easily it shocked them both. "I was jealous. I am jealous. But I was also terrified, because Onyx isn't just a club. It's Arthur Vane's territory, and Arthur Vane is the kind of man who uses people like you as collateral. So I'll ask you one more time, why were you there? Devon looked away, her jaw working like she was chewing on words she didn't want to say. The SUV turned onto the highway, the city lights blurring past the windows. Quentin waited. He was good at waiting. He'd built an empire on patience and strategic silence. Finally, Devon spoke. Jesse owes money. Quentin's expression didn't change, but something in the air shifted. To Vane? To one of Vane's people. $40,000. Gambling debts, mostly. Some loans he took out to cover the gambling debts. It got out of hand. Her voice was tight, controlled, but Quentin could hear the fear underneath. They gave him until the end of the month to pay it back. That's 2 weeks from now. If he doesn't... She stopped, swallowing hard. They said they'd make an example of him. And you thought you could negotiate? Quentin's voice was dangerously quiet. I thought I could buy him time. Maybe work out a payment plan. I don't know. Her voice cracked, just slightly. He's my brother, Quentin. He's the only family I have left. I had to try. Something didn't add up. And the truth was darker than he expected. Quentin sat back, his mind already running through calculations. $40,000 to Arthur Vane's organization. That was pocket change. They didn't care about the money. They cared about making an example of someone to show that debts got paid, one way or another. And Jesse Blake, young, stupid, connected to Quentin Vance's household through his sister, was the perfect target. You should have told me, Quentin said. Why? Devon's eyes flashed. So you could fire me for having a brother with a gambling problem? So you could cut me loose before I became a liability? So I could help. The words came out harsher than he intended. You think I'd let Vane's people hurt you? Hurt someone you care about? I'm your maid, Quentin. Not your responsibility. You're more than that. The confession hung in the air between them, heavy and undeniable. You have been for a long time. Devon stared at him. The SUV took the exit toward Quentin's building, the familiar skyline coming into view. She should have felt relief she was going home, or at least to the place that felt like home even though she just cleaned it. Instead, she felt something else, something dangerous. What does that mean? She asked quietly. Quentin looked at her, really looked at her. And for the first time since the club, his mask slipped entirely. It means I'm going to fix this. It means Jesse's debt is gone as of tonight. It means you're not going back to that club or anywhere near Arthur Vane ever again. And it means... He stopped, his jaw tightening. It means you're under my protection now. Officially. Non-negotiably. I didn't ask for that. I don't care. Quentin, one wrong move, and everything would fall apart. $40,000, Quentin interrupted. That's what Jesse owes. I'll have it transferred to Vane's accounts tonight. The debt is cleared. Jesse is safe. And you... He leaned forward again, his voice dropping to something that was almost gentle. You never have to be scared like that again. Do you understand? Devon's throat tightened. Why would you do that? Because I can't. Quentin stopped, his control fracturing for just a moment. Because I can't watch you put yourself in danger for anyone, not even your brother. Not when I have the resources to make the problem disappear. And what do I owe you? Devon asked, because there was always a price. There was always something owed. Nothing, Quentin said. You owe me nothing. But I need you to promise me something. What? That if something like this happens again, if Jesse gets in trouble, if you're scared, if you need help, you come to me first, not to Vane, not to anyone else, me. Devon searched his face for the catch, the ulterior motive, the hidden cost. But all she saw was a man who'd just offered to pay $40,000 to keep her safe without asking for anything in return. A man who'd made a fool of himself in public because he thought she was in danger. Okay, she whispered. I promise. Quentin nodded, something in his expression softening. The SUV pulled into the underground garage of his building, the familiar concrete and fluorescent lights replacing the city's glow. But nothing felt familiar anymore. Everything had changed tonight. The professional distance between them had shattered, and Devon didn't know if it could ever be rebuilt. Quentin opened the door, then paused. Devon? Yeah? I'm sorry. For grabbing you, for yelling, for... He stopped, his voice rough, for making you feel like you couldn't tell me the truth. Devon looked at him, this powerful, dangerous man who controlled half the city but couldn't control the way he felt about his maid, and realized with stunning clarity that she was in serious trouble. Apology accepted, she said quietly. They rode the elevator in silence. But it wasn't the comfortable silence of employer and employee. It was something else. Something heavier. Something that felt a lot like the beginning of the end of everything Devon had been trying to keep separate. When the doors opened to Quentin's penthouse, Devon stepped out first. And for the first time in 2 years, she didn't head toward the kitchen or the laundry room. She stood in the foyer and waited. Because whatever came next, they were facing it together. The penthouse was exactly as Devon had left it that morning, immaculate, organized, every surface gleaming. But walking into it now felt different. She wasn't here as the maid who kept Quentin's life running. She was here as the woman whose brother owed money to Quentin's rival. The woman Quentin had just publicly claimed in front of 300 witnesses. The woman who'd just accepted his protection without fully understanding what that meant. Quentin shrugged off his suit jacket and draped it over the back of the leather sofa. He rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms that Devon had spent 2 years pretending not to notice, and poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey from the bar cart. He didn't offer her one. He knew she didn't drink. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the sofa. "I'd rather stand." "Devon." There was a warning in his voice. "I'm not one of your employees you can just order around, Quentin. I mean, I am, technically, but right now I'm—" She stopped, frustrated. "I don't know what I am right now." But there was one thing he didn't know about his closest ally. "You're someone who's about to tell me everything about Jesse's involvement with Vane's organization," Quentin said. "Starting with how long this has been going on and ending with every name, every face, every detail you know." Devon crossed her arms. "I already told you. He owes $40,000. That's it." "That's not it." Quentin took a slow sip of his whiskey, his eyes never leaving hers. "Men like Arthur Vane don't just loan money and wait for it to come back. They invest in people. They buy loyalty. And judging by the watch your brother was wearing and the way he positioned himself between us outside the club, Jesse isn't just a debtor, he's an asset. So I'll ask again, how deep is he in?" Devon felt something cold settle in her stomach. She'd been so focused on the debt, on the immediate threat of violence if Jesse didn't pay, that she hadn't let herself think about the bigger picture. But Quentin was right. The expensive watch, the designer jacket, the fact that Jesse had been at Vane's club like he belonged there? "I don't know," Devon said quietly. "I didn't ask." "Why not?" "Because I didn't want to know." The words came out sharper than she intended. "Because Jesse is 24 years old and he's supposed to be in grad school. But instead he's—" Her voice broke, just slightly. "Instead, he's working for the kind of people who break legs when debts don't get paid. And I thought if I could just get him out of the debt, maybe he'd walk away. Maybe he'd go back to school. Maybe he'd—" Everyone thought the deal went smoothly. But they were wrong. "Devon." Quentin set down his glass and crossed the room in 3 long strides. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "Jesse isn't going to walk away. Men like Vane don't let assets go. Especially not assets who have connections to people like me. The moment Vane's people found out Jesse was your brother, they started using him. That's why the debt is $40,000 and not $4,000. That's why they gave him an impossible deadline. They're setting him up to fail so they can control him permanently. And the endgame—" Quentin's jaw tightened. "The endgame is you." The words hit like a physical blow. "Me? You're in my house 6 days a week. You have access to my schedule, my contacts, my private spaces. If Vane can control Jesse, he can use Jesse to control you. And if he can control you—" Quentin stopped, his expression going dark. "He gets eyes and ears inside my operation. That's the play, Devon. Your brother isn't the target. You are." Devon felt the room tilt. She reached out instinctively, and Quentin's hands caught her elbows, steadying her. His touch was firm, grounding, and she hated how much she needed it in that moment. Hidden in the files was a secret that could destroy them all. "That's why you were at the club tonight, isn't it?" Quentin's voice was gentler now, but no less intense. "You weren't trying to negotiate Jesse's debt. You were trying to figure out what Vane wanted. I thought—" Devon swallowed hard. "I thought if I talked to him, if I explained that Jesse and I weren't close, that I didn't know anything valuable, maybe he'd leave us alone." "Devon." Quentin's grip tightened, just slightly. "Men like Arthur Vane don't respond to reason. They respond to power. And the only thing he understands is that you're mine now. The moment I grabbed your wrist in that club, the moment I made it clear you're under my protection, the game changed. He can't touch you. He can't use Jesse to get to you. Because if he tries," Quentin's voice dropped to something deadly, "if he tries, I'll bury him." Devon stared at him. "Why are you doing this? I told you. You're more than just my maid." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting tonight." Quentin released her elbows but didn't step back. "Now tell me everything. Every conversation you've had with Jesse about Vane, every name he's mentioned, every detail, no matter how small. I need to know what we're up against. He should have walked away, but then he saw it. Devon took a shaky breath and started talking. She told him about Jesse's phone calls over the past 6 months, how he'd sounded stressed, then evasive, then desperate. She told him about the night 3 weeks ago when Jesse had shown up at her apartment at 2 a.m, drunk and crying, saying he'd made a mistake and didn't know how to fix it. She told him about the watch she'd noticed tonight, the one that cost more than Jesse made in a year at his part-time job. She told him everything, and Quentin listened with the focused intensity of a man cataloging ammunition. When she finished, Quentin was silent for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and typed a message. Marcus is pulling Jesse's financial records right now. By morning, I'll know every transaction, every account, every piece of leverage Vane has on your brother. And then he looked up, his eyes hard. Then I'm going to take it all away. Just like that? Devon's voice was small. Just like that. And what do I do? You stay here. You don't go to work tomorrow. You don't leave this building until I tell you it's safe. Quentin, I can't just... You can, and you will. His tone left no room for argument. Vane knows I was at his club tonight. He knows I made a scene over you, which means he knows you're important to me. And that makes you a target until I neutralize the threat. So you're staying here, in this penthouse, where I can keep you safe. Devon wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could take care of herself. But the truth was, she was terrified. Terrified for Jesse, terrified of what Vane might do. Terrified of the way her life had just been turned inside out in the span of 2 hours. Okay, she whispered. Quentin nodded, something in his expression softening. I'll take the guest room tonight. You take my bed. I can't. Devon. He stepped closer, and suddenly the air between them felt charged. Please, just let me do this. Let me keep you safe. She looked up at him, this dangerous, powerful man who'd just rearranged his entire life to protect her, and realized she didn't have the strength to fight him anymore. Okay, she said again. Quentin's shoulders relaxed, just slightly. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we dismantle Arthur Vane's operation from the inside out. Devon nodded and headed toward the master bedroom. At the doorway, she paused and looked back. Quentin was standing at the window, silhouetted against the city lights, his phone already at his ear. Even from across the room, she could hear the steel in his voice as he gave orders. This was the Quentin Vance the city feared, the man who controlled empires and destroyed enemies. And for the first time, Devon understood that she wasn't just under his protection. She was the reason he was going to war. Devon woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the disorienting realization that she was in Quentin's bed. The sheets were expensive, the kind of high thread count that felt like silk against her skin. The mattress was perfect. The entire room smelled like him sandalwood and something darker, something that made her chest tighten. She sat up, her borrowed sleep shirt one of Quentin's, because she hadn't exactly packed falling off one shoulder. The clock on the nightstand said 9:47 a.m. She never slept past 7, ever. Even on her days off, her body refused to let her rest past dawn. She climbed out of bed and padded barefoot across the hardwood floor to the door. The penthouse was quiet, but she could hear voices coming from Quentin's office. His voice, low and commanding, and another voice she didn't recognize. She followed the sound and found the office door cracked open. He realized he wasn't alone. Someone else had arrived. Quentin was standing behind his desk, his shirt from last night replaced by a fresh white button-down, his sleeves rolled up again. His hair was slightly disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it. Marcus stood to his left, holding a tablet. And on the other side of the desk, looking young and terrified, was Jesse. Devon pushed the door open. All 3 men turned to look at her. Devon, Jesse said, relief flooding his voice. He started toward her, but Quentin's hand shot out, stopping him. Stay where you are, Quentin said quietly. Jesse froze. Devon's heart hammered. What's going on? Jesse and I are having a conversation, Quentin said. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it that made Devon's skin prickle. About his employment with Arthur Vane's organization. I'm not employed by Vane, Jesse said quickly. I owe him money. That's it. Are you Team Devon and Quentin? Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. This story is just getting started, and the real danger hasn't even begun. That's not it. Quentin picked up a piece of paper from his desk and held it up. This is a wire transfer from one of Vane's shell corporations to your personal account. $5,000, dated 3 weeks ago. The memo line says consulting fee. Want to explain what you were consulting on? Jesse's face went pale. I didn't do anything illegal. I didn't ask if it was illegal. I asked what you were consulting on. Jesse looked at Devon, his eyes pleading. She wanted to defend him, wanted to tell Quentin to back off. But something in Marcus's expression stopped her. This wasn't an interrogation. This was something worse. This was Quentin confirming what he already knew. What she found in the envelope froze her in place. Jesse, Devon said quietly. What did you do? I gave him information, Jesse said, his voice breaking. About your schedule, about when you were home, about how to reach you. The room went very still. You sold her out, Quentin said. It wasn't a question. No, Jesse's voice cracked. I didn't, Vane said. He just wanted to send her a message. He said you'd been causing problems for his business and he needed leverage. He said no one would get hurt. I didn't know. He looked at Devon, tears streaming down his face. I didn't know he'd go after you like this. I swear. I thought he just wanted to scare Quentin. I didn't think... You didn't think at all, Quentin interrupted. You took $5,000 to give a dangerous man access to your sister. And now she's in danger because of you. This was only the beginning of a much bigger war. Jesse's legs seemed to give out. He sank into the chair behind him, his head in his hands. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll pay it back. I'll fix this. You can't fix this, Quentin said. But I can. He walked around the desk and crouched in front of Jesse, forcing the younger man to meet his eyes. Here's what's going to happen. Marcus is going to take you to a secure location. You're going to stay there until I've dealt with Vane. You're not going to contact him. You're not going to contact any of his people. You're going to sit quietly and let me clean up your mess. Do you understand? Jesse nodded, unable to speak. And when this is over, Quentin continued, his voice dropping to something colder, you're going to get help. Real help. For the gambling. For whatever else is going on in your life that made you think selling out your sister was an acceptable choice. And if you ever put Devon in danger again, what Vane would have done to you will look like mercy compared to what I'll do. Are we clear? Yes, Jesse whispered. His right-hand man had been hiding something from him. Quentin stood and nodded to Marcus, who put a hand on Jesse's shoulder and guided him toward the door. Jesse looked at Devon as he passed, his face a mask of shame and regret. I'm sorry, he said again. Devon didn't respond. She couldn't. The betrayal was too fresh, too raw. She watched Marcus lead Jesse out of the penthouse, and then it was just her and Quentin in the too quiet office. You're angry, Quentin said. I'm furious. Devon's voice shook. He sold me out, my own brother. He's an addict. Quentin's voice was gentler now. Addicts make terrible choices. They hurt the people they love because they can't see past their next fix, their next bet, their next high. It doesn't excuse what he did, but it explains it. You're defending him? I'm explaining him there's a difference. Quentin crossed the room and stopped in front of her. Jesse made a choice that put you in danger, and I'm going to make sure that choice never has consequences for you. But I'm also going to make sure Jesse gets the help he needs. Because whether you're ready to forgive him or not, he's your brother. And I know what it's like to lose family. Devon looked up at him, and something in her chest cracked open. Why are you doing this? I told you. No, she shook her head. Don't give me that line about me being more than your maid. Tell me the truth. Why are you protecting me? Why are you protecting Jesse? Why did you lose your mind at that club last night? He wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting for family. Quentin stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, he reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was so gentle, so intimate, that Devon's breath caught. Because I need you, Quentin said quietly. I need you in a way that violates every rule I've ever made for myself. I need the way you organize my life. I need the way you bring me coffee without being asked. I need the way you exist in my space without making demands or trying to change me. He stopped, his jaw working. I need the peace you bring me. And the thought of losing you makes me want to burn the entire city down. Devon's heart was hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Quentin, you asked for the truth, he said. That's the truth. I'm obsessed with you, Devon Blake. I have been for months. And last night, when I saw you with another man, even thinking it was your brother, I lost my mind. Because the idea of anyone else touching you, anyone else making you smile, anyone else having access to the parts of you that I want. He stopped, his control fracturing. I can't survive that. I don't know how. Devon stared at him. This powerful, dangerous man was standing in front of her, completely vulnerable. admitting that his maid had become the center of his entire world. It should have terrified her. It should have sent her running. Instead, she stepped closer. "I need to know something," Devon said quietly. "Anything. If I let this happen, if I let you protect me, if I accept what you're offering, what does that make me?" "Mine," Quentin said without hesitation. "It makes you mine, and I make you safe." Devon searched his face, looking for the lie, the manipulation, the hidden cost. But all she saw was a man who'd rearranged his life in 12 hours to keep her from harm. A man who'd paid her brother's debt without asking for anything in return. A man who'd admitted he was obsessed with her and didn't care who knew it. "Okay," Devon whispered. Quentin's eyes widened. "Okay? I'm yours." The words should have felt like surrender. Instead, they felt like power. "And you're going to keep me safe." And suddenly, he realized he was being played. Quentin's control snapped. He closed the distance between them and kissed her hard, desperate, like he'd been holding himself back for years and finally broke. Devon kissed him back with equal desperation, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. This was insane. This was dangerous. This was crossing every professional line that had ever existed between them. She didn't care. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Quentin rested his forehead against hers. "I'm going to destroy Arthur Vane for this," he said quietly. "For threatening you, for using Jesse, for making you scared." "I know," Devon said. "And then I'm going to make sure nothing like this ever happens again." "How?" Quentin pulled back, his dark eyes locked on hers. "By making you my partner. Officially. Permanently. So everyone knows that touching you means going to war with me." Devon's breath caught. "Quentin, you don't have to answer now," he said. "But I need you to know that's where this is going. That's what I want. You. Not as my maid. Not as some secret I keep hidden. As my partner. In everything." Devon stared at him, her mind racing. 24 hours ago, she'd been worried about paying her rent on time and keeping her brother out of trouble. Now she was standing in a penthouse, being offered a partnership with one of the most dangerous men in the city. "What if I say yes?" Devon asked quietly. "Then we start planning how to take down Arthur Vane," Quentin said. "Together." Devon took a deep breath. She thought about Jesse, trapped by his own bad choices. She thought about the life she'd been living paycheck to paycheck, always one crisis away from disaster. She thought about the way Quentin looked at her, like she was the only thing in the world worth protecting. "Okay," Devon said. "Let's take him down." Quentin smiled, a real smile, dangerous and beautiful. "Tell me everything you know about Vane's operation." "I don't know much. You know more than you think." Quentin led her to the desk and pulled up a chair beside his. "Jesse's been working for Vane for months. He's been to meetings, seen faces, heard names. And you've been listening to him talk about his life. So start from the beginning. Tell me every detail, no matter how small." But the real question was, who planned it? Devon sat down and started talking. She told him about the names Jesse had mentioned, low-level operators, a few mid-tier managers, nothing high-level. She told him about the locations Jesse had referenced, a warehouse in Red Hook, a restaurant in Chinatown that served as a front, a storage facility near the docks. She told him about the patterns she'd noticed in Jesse spending the cash infusions every 2 weeks, the expensive dinners he could suddenly afford, the way he'd stopped asking her for money. Quentin listened to everything, taking notes, cross-referencing against information Marcus had already gathered. And slowly, a picture began to emerge. Arthur Vane's operation wasn't as sophisticated as Quentin had assumed. It was messy, disorganized, held together by fear and cash, which meant it had weaknesses, exploitable weaknesses. "This is good," Quentin said, leaning back in his chair. "This is very good." "Good how?" "Vane's been expanding too fast. He's got fingers in 20 different operations, but he doesn't have the infrastructure to support them, which means he's vulnerable. And if we can cut off his revenue streams," Quentin's smile turned predatory, "we can starve him out." "How long will that take?" 2 weeks, maybe less. Quentin turned to look at her. "But I need you to stay out of sight until it's done. No going to your apartment. No visiting Jesse. No leaving this building. I can't just hide here for 2 weeks." "Yes, you can. And you will." Quentin's voice softened. "Please, Devon. I can't protect you if I don't know where you are." This single decision gave him the upper hand again. Devon wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could take care of herself. But the truth was, she was scared. Scared of Vane. Scared of what Jesse had done. scared of how her life had just been turned upside down. "Okay," she said quietly. Quentin reached out and took her hand. "I promise you, this will be over soon. And when it is, you'll never have to be scared again." Devon looked down at their joined hands, his large and calloused, hers smaller and ink-stained from the notes she'd been taking. It should have felt wrong. Employer and employee, Mafia Boss and Maid. Instead, it felt right. "What happens after?" Devon asked. After you take down Vane. After Jesse is safe. What happens to us?" Quentin's grip tightened. "Whatever you want to happen. I want the truth. The truth is that I'm in love with you," Quentin said, and the words landed like an earthquake. "I've been in love with you for months. Maybe longer. And I'm done pretending I'm not. So what happens after is that we stop hiding. We stop pretending this is just about protection or convenience. We make this real." For once, he wasn't thinking like a boss, but like a man about to lose everything. Devon's heart was racing so fast she thought she might pass out. "Quentin, you don't have to say it back," he said quickly. "I don't expect. I love you too." The words came out before she could stop them. "I've loved you for so long I forgot what it felt like not to." Quentin stared at her, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked completely undone. "Devon, I mean it." Her voice was steady now. "I love you, and I'm terrified, but I love you." Quentin pulled her into his arms, and Devon let herself collapse against his chest. He held her like she was the most precious thing in the world, and for the first time in years, Devon felt safe. "We're going to be okay," Quentin whispered against her hair. "I promise. We're going to be okay." Devon closed her eyes and let herself believe him. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of strategy meetings, encrypted phone calls, and carefully orchestrated moves against Arthur Vane's empire. Devon watched from the penthouse as Quentin systematically dismantled everything Vane had built. First, the warehouse in Red Hook shut down by the fire marshal for code violations. Then the restaurant in Chinatown raided by the health department and closed indefinitely. Then the storage facility near the docks, suddenly bought out by a shell corporation that Marcus controlled. He thought it was over until he noticed something strange. One by one, Vane's revenue streams dried up. His people started jumping ship. His suppliers stopped returning his calls. And through it all, Quentin kept Devon close, refusing to let her out of his sight for more than a few hours at a time. She should have felt suffocated. Instead, she felt protected. On the 13th day, Marcus came to the penthouse with news. "Jesse's clean," he said. "We've pulled all his financial ties to Vane. The debt's paid, the accounts are closed, and we've set him up with a therapist who specializes in addiction. He starts next week." "And Vane?" Quentin asked. "Bleeding out. He's trying to keep up appearances, but word on the street is he's desperate. He's reaching out to old contacts, trying to call in favors, but no one wants to touch him. You've made him toxic." "Good." Quentin's expression was cold. "Set up a meeting. Neutral location, tomorrow night." Marcus nodded and left. Devon, who'd been sitting on the sofa reading, looked up. "You're meeting with Vane?" "I'm ending this," Quentin said, "permanently." "What does that mean?" Quentin crossed the room and sat down beside her. "It means I'm going to make it very clear that you're off limits, that Jesse's off limits, that anyone who comes near either of you answers to me." "Will he listen?" "He doesn't have a choice." Quentin's voice was hard. "I've taken everything from him. His money, his power, his reputation. The only thing he has left is his life, and I'm going to let him keep it as long as he stays away from you." But he had no idea a bigger force was controlling everything. Devon set down her book. "I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not." "Quentin, he tried to use me as leverage. I deserve to be there when you end this." "It's too dangerous." "You just said you've taken everything from him." "How dangerous can he be?" "Desperate men are the most dangerous kind." Quentin reached out and cupped her face. "Please, Devon, let me do this. Let me keep you safe." Devon wanted to argue, but she looked into Quentin's eyes and saw the fear lurking beneath the control. He wasn't keeping her away because he didn't think she could handle it. He was keeping her away because he couldn't handle the thought of her in danger. "Okay," Devon said quietly. "But you come back to me in one piece." "Always," Quentin promised. The next night, Quentin left the penthouse at 9 p.m., flanked by Marcus and 3 other members of his security team. Devon watched from the window as the SUV pulled away, her heart hammering in her chest. She tried to read, tried to watch TV, tried to do anything other than imagine all the ways this could go wrong. At 11:47 p.m., her phone buzzed. A text from Quentin. "It's done. On my way home." He had no idea the night would end in blood. Devon's legs gave out. She sank onto the sofa, relief flooding through her so intensely she thought she might cry. It was over. Whatever Quentin had said to Vane, whatever threats he'd made, it was enough. Jessie was safe. She was safe. They were safe. 20 minutes later, she heard the elevator. She was on her feet before the doors opened, and when Quentin walked into the penthouse, she threw herself into his arms. He caught her easily, holding her tight, his face buried in her hair. "It's over," Quentin said quietly. "He's gone. He won't come near you again." "What did you do?" "I gave him a choice. Leave the city by the end of the week, or I destroy what's left of his life. He chose to leave." Devon pulled back to look at him. "Just like that?" "Just like that." Quentin's smile was grim. "I also made it very clear that if he ever contacts you or Jessie, if he even thinks about either of you, I'll finish what I started." He believed me. "Quentin." "I know." He cupped her face, his thumbs brushing away tears she didn't realize she'd shed. "I know I'm terrifying. I know what I'm capable of. But I need you to understand something. I will always choose you. Over strategy, over business, over everything. You're my line in the sand, Devon. And anyone who crosses it learns what happens when you threaten the one thing I can't live without." What followed next was completely unexpected. Devon kissed him. It was desperate and grateful and full of all the words she didn't know how to say. Quentin kissed her back with equal intensity, his hands tangling in her hair, pulling her impossibly closer. When they finally broke apart, Devon was breathless. "What happens now?" "Now?" Quentin's smile softened. "Now we build something real. Together." Chapter 7. Climax: The Final Confrontation. 3 days later, Quentin called Devon into his office. She found him standing behind his desk, dressed in a dark suit that made him look every inch the powerful man he was. But his expression was soft, almost nervous, which was so unlike him that Devon's heart skipped. "Sit," Quentin said, gesturing to the chair across from him. Devon sat, her hands folded in her lap. "Am I in trouble?" "No." Quentin reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small black box. He set it on the desk between them, and Devon's breath caught. "Quentin." "Before you panic," he said quickly. "It's not a ring. Not yet, anyway." "Then what is it?" "Open it." He didn't want revenge, he needed it. Devon reached out with trembling hands and opened the box. Inside was a key, simple, silver, unremarkable except for the weight of what it represented. "That's the key to my private office," Quentin said, "and to my safe, and to every locked door in this building. It's yours now." Devon stared at the key. "Why?" "Because I meant what I said. I want you as my partner. Not just in taking down people like Vane, but in everything. My business, my life, my future. And partners don't have locked doors between them." "Quentin, I can't." "Yes, you can." He stood and walked around the desk, kneeling in front of her. "Devon, I'm not asking you to be my maid anymore. I'm asking you to be my partner, my equal, the person I build my life around. And I know it's fast. I know it's insane. But I've never been more certain of anything." Devon looked down at him, this powerful, dangerous man kneeling in front of her, offering her not just his protection but his entire world, and felt something shift inside her chest. "What about Jessie?" she asked quietly. "What about him? He betrayed me. He sold me out to Vane. But this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. And he's paying for it," Quentin said. "He's in therapy. He's cut off from everyone in Vane's circle. He's rebuilding his life from scratch. But he's your brother, Devon. And when you're ready, if you're ready to let him back into your life, I'll support that. Because I'm not just choosing you. I'm choosing everything that comes with you." Devon's throat tightened. "You mean that?" "I mean that." Quentin reached up and took her hands. "I love you. And I want to spend the rest of my life proving it. So say yes. Please." Devon looked at the key in her palm, then at Quentin, then back at the key. This was insane. This was moving too fast. This violated every rule of professionalism and common sense, but it also felt right. "Yes," Devon whispered. "I'll be your partner." Quentin's smile was blinding. He stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with enough force to steal her breath. Devon kissed him back, her hands fisting in his hair, and for the first time in years, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. When they finally broke apart, Quentin rested his forehead against hers. "You're mine now," he said quietly. "Officially." "And you're mine," Devon said. "Always." 6 months later, Devon stood on the rooftop of Quentin's building, looking out at the city that had once felt like a prison and now felt like a kingdom. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, and the sounds of traffic were distant enough to feel like white noise. She heard footsteps behind her and didn't need to turn around to know it was Quentin. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest, and she leaned into him with the ease of familiarity. "What are you thinking about?" Quentin asked. "How different everything is," Devon said. 6 months ago, I was your maid. Now I'm—" She stopped, searching for the right word. "My partner," Quentin finished. "My equal. The person who runs half my operations and makes better strategic decisions than I do." Devon laughed. "I don't know about that." "I do." Quentin pressed a kiss to her temple. "You've revolutionized my logistics operations, improved profit margins by 30%, and convinced 3 of my biggest rivals to negotiate instead of fight. You're brilliant, Devon Blake. And everyone knows it. Everyone also knows I used to clean your floors. And now you run my empire." Quentin turned her around to face him. "Does that bother you? What people say?" "It used to," Devon admitted. "But then I realized I don't care. I'm not the maid anymore. I'm the woman who helped take down Arthur Vane. I'm the woman who reorganized your entire business structure. I'm the woman you chose." "I chose well," Quentin said, and kissed her. When they broke apart, Devon looked up at him. "What about Jesse? What about him?" "He called me yesterday. He's been clean for 5 months. He wants to meet for coffee. Do you want to see him?" Devon thought about it. 6 months ago, the betrayal had felt insurmountable, but Jesse had done the work. He'd gone to therapy. He'd gotten clean. He'd rebuilt his life without asking for her help. And despite everything, he was still her brother. "Yeah," Devon said, "I do." "Then see him," Quentin said. "And if it goes badly, I'll be here. Always." Devon smiled and leaned up to kiss him again. "I love you." "I love you too," Quentin said. "More than I thought was possible." They stood on the rooftop as the sun set. 2 people who'd found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built something real from the wreckage of their old lives. Devon was no longer the invisible maid. Quentin was no longer the man who kept everyone at arm's length. They were partners, equals. 2 halves of a whole that had been forged in danger and sealed with trust. And as the city lights began to flicker on below them, Devon realized that her hidden life was gone, replaced by something better, something permanent, something fiercely protected and absolutely real. She was Devon Blake, the logistics queen, the woman who'd been invisible and became essential, the woman who'd survived betrayal and danger and came out the other side stronger. And she was loved completely, permanently, fiercely by the most dangerous man in the city. And that, Devon thought as Quentin pulled her closer. As the stars began to appear overhead, as she looked out at the empire they'd built together that was worth everything. If you felt something while watching, please subscribe. That's how I know these stories mean something to you, even on your TV. Take a second to join our community of story lovers. Your support keeps this world of emotions alive.